I head up the practice support team division of Burkhart. And we know that the information that you're going to receive today from Beacon PPO Solutions is going to be invaluable to you all as you look at navigating and approaching your PPO contracts. With 20 years of experience in the industry, Kelsey and Bailey have established themselves as leaders in PPO negotiations, in optimization, and in credentialing as well. We were just talking before we started about the incredible reviews that their group is receiving. So I'm thrilled to have them with us today and have you learn more about our topic, 5 ways to increase PPO revenue. So I'm going to turn it over to Bailey and Kelsey.
Thank you, Margaret and Burkhart, for having us. And thanks for everyone who's tuned in so far. I'm sure we're going to get some people coming along the way. My name's Kelsey, and this is Bailey. Make sure you're unmuted, Bailey.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Thanks for telling me. Thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, so we are really excited to share this information. It's probably one of the hotter topics out there right now, and it's because it's such an important thing. And most offices don't really know where to start when it comes to their PPO insurance contract and trying to get those fair reimbursements that you deserve. Insurance participation is kind of a necessary thing for a lot of offices. It's great in bringing in new patients to the office and increasing, your growth, your patient flow, and help you build a patient base. The downside is that you have to abide by a set fee schedule in exchange for being in network with these insurances. And a lot of the time that fee schedule is paying quite a bit lower than your asking price fees. So your UCR fee, when a cash paying client comes in, you're able to do their work, collect your fee, and it's all good and well. For an insured patient coming into your office, you do that same amount of work. You bill the insurance company and they dictate what you're able to collect for the treatment of that patient. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, offices are writing off anywhere between 40 to 60% of their UCR fee. So although those patients do fill the chair, when you're only collecting half of what is a good fee, that's fair, you can see where that can get a little bit frustrating. And I'm sure you guys are already well aware of that. So that's where we come in. We help offices to optimize and increase their PPO revenue, mostly through strategic contracting of insurances and negotiating your fee schedule. So even startups, before you sign up with insurance companies, you can negotiate the fees. Established offices, you can actually reach out and negotiate your fee schedules every 2 years. And some people, a lot of people, most people don't know that because it's not really a public knowledge that insurance companies want to share. So today we're going to go over the 5 keys to increase PPO revenue, and Bailey and I will kind of jump back and forth with each other to give you some good information today. And then at the end, we'll have some time for you to share or ask any questions. You can always think of specific situations in your office that you're going through or that you're seeing. And we can get personal in that way and kind of answer some of your questions and see what's going on, see how we might be able to help you. So we're just going to jump right in here for the 5 keys of increasing PPO revenue. And the first one I'm going to go over, but there they all are. We have analyze, evaluate, negotiate, optimize, and illuminate. So we'll touch base on all of these. The first one is to analyze. So a lot of offices that make the effort to go through and they're like, okay, we want to start negotiating their fee schedules. One of the main problems I see is that they don't set a ground to get started with that process. So there's some data you want to look at before you just jump in. And you want to be ready to track everything you're going to be doing. Otherwise, if things can get out of hand very, very quickly. Things can be lost in translation, especially when you're reaching out to 15, 20 insurance companies. You have all these contacts. it's hard to keep track of where you are. So first off, analyze. We want to take a look at, first off, your UCR fee. The best thing to do is to start with a UCR fee evaluation. So taking a look at market data for your area and making sure your fees are set in a good spot. Main reason for this is to make sure that the insurance companies don't cap what they're willing to pay you. If your fee is very low, in theory for them, they think that their fee schedule pays pretty well. So you want to just make sure that things are in a competitive spot so that you aren't shooting yourself in the foot when you're asking for increases, because the insurance companies will request those UCR fees to take a look at. You just want to make sure that you're in a competitive spot, not too low. Next up, taking a look at insurance revenue per carrier. So getting a good idea of how much business you actually do with each insurance company. Taking a look at that revenue kind of gives you a good idea of what your priority companies are. And not only that, but if you run revenue per code reports in your practice management system, often it will show you how much you billed, how much you received, and how much you wrote off. This is like a very illuminating report to run, because a lot of offices all of a sudden see that they're billing out $1 million on all of their insurances and then collecting like 400,000. And the doctor sees that $600,000 and they're like, oh, where did that go? It's written off. So you want to take a look at your revenue per insurance carrier so you can kind of know what you're looking at beforehand. Procedure code utilization. So when you go into negotiations with insurance companies, it's important to note that your top 30 to 35 codes are the most important for your practice. You want to very strongly focus on those ones that bring in the most revenue. Usually about 30 to 35 codes make up about 90% of practice revenue. So trying to make sure that you're tracking those, identifying what they are by just looking at reports in your practice management system that shows how much money you make per code, and identifying what brings in the most, and then making sure that you are ready to use those in your negotiation. And then patient flow and practice goals is the last thing you want to analyze. So you have to ask yourself questions like the busyness of your office, for example. Is the schedule so booked out that you need to schedule out hygiene and visits, months out? Are you in a position where everything's kind of hit that sweet spot where you have the patient flow you want, as busy as you want, and everything's good? Or are you in that situation where maybe you really want to start growing your practice and getting more patients in the chair? Identify what spot you're in, because that will dictate after negotiations some ideas of what your path is going to be afterward. So that's it for analyze. You want to go through and make sure all of this data is very put together so that you have a good, clear plan moving forward into the actual negotiation. So next, Bailey's going to go over evaluate, and this is where we start actually getting into the insurance communication. Go ahead, Bay.
Thanks, Kelsey. Okay, so obviously our next step is to evaluate, and this step is basically just seeing what you actually have in terms of participation, who you're in network with, and stuff like that. And this used to be a lot more cut and dry in terms of, you credential with an insurance company and you're in network or you're out of network. And it used to be really, really simple, but things like PPO leasing and umbrella companies started to come in the last few years, become really prominent. And that's why it's important to identify your participation structure, which is our first step in the evaluation phase. And that's basically just reaching out to each insurance company and confirming if you're in network or out of network. And a lot of the time, because of leasing arrangements and those umbrella companies, like I mentioned, you can be in network with an insurance company through another insurance company, which for a lot of offices becomes confusing on claims and stuff like that. So when you are calling these insurance companies and figuring out if you're in network or out of network, a lot of the time you're wanting to know if you're in network with a direct contract, meaning you credentialed and you're good to go and you have a set fee schedule, or if you're in network through a leasing arrangement such as Dentamax or Connection or one of those umbrella companies. And then once you figure out that, you're going to want to request your current fee schedule. What fee schedule are you following? And make sure you have a current copy of that, because that's going to be a really important thing once you, and our next step is to evaluate your current fee schedules and just to see how they're paying in terms of, and like Kelsey said, just to make sure you have your priorities kind of in line to see, to evaluate your current fees and see which is paying really, really good, maybe those in the middle, and then those low-hanging fruit that are really gonna be a big priority in your negotiations because those are so low. And so once you have all those current fee schedules, you're gonna want to evaluate, like I said, how they're paying. And this is what's really important to do when you're evaluating these, is those codes, like Kelsey mentioned, those top 30 to 35 codes that bring in most of your guys' revenue. Those are the ones that you're going to want to look at when you are comparing these fee schedules side by side, because those bring in most of your revenue. And basically taking a look at those fees side by side, like I said, seeing what ones are paying really good and what ones are paying a little bit lower. And then basically coming up with a negotiation strategy to move forward with that. And so you can find negotiation leverage through comparing that fee schedule data, and then just seeing how you move into the next step, which is, once you have all this data, who you're in network with, how your fee schedules are paying, what your priorities are, that's when you can move into the negotiation step, which is our biggest step, and Kelsey will go over that.
Thank you, Bailey. Yeah, this one is the meat and potatoes of the whole entire thing. And it's a lot of work. So usually if you start doing PPO negotiations, or even when we start doing PPO negotiations, it takes about 4 to 5 months to get through this negotiation phase. Depending on how good you are at it and how much you're trying to push these companies to pay. A lot of offices make mistakes of being like, okay, we're going to negotiate their fees. They send out an email to a few insurance companies, like maybe their top ones, like Cigna, MetLife, Aetna, Guardian, a couple of those. And then they just wait to hear something back. And I'm telling you, most of the time, you're not going to get anything back. If insurance companies can bypass this by just not responding to an email, they definitely will. So let's just kind of go through the steps of negotiations. First off, obviously, the easy part is to initiate the requests. I won't say it's easy because you do have to make sure you do it a certain way. So first off, your insurance companies, they have the ability to negotiate your fees or give you a fee review every 2 to 3 years. So if you haven't been doing that over the past 10 or more years, or even the last 2 years, it's time to negotiate now. You definitely want to reach out to all insurance companies for offers, even if you're not directly contracted with them. So as Bailey said, you identify what your current participation is. You could be in network with Aetna through a direct contract. You might be in network with Aetna through a leaser, like that you can be in through Guardian, you can be in through Sun Life, Connection, all of these different options. So identifying the way that you're in network so that you can send the right kind of request. But even if you're out of network, it's a good idea to get offers for all companies so you can start making comparisons. And you want to make contact with the correct department or representative as well. All of those are pretty basic. Once you get those out, it's kind of first off, wait, but also follow up. So next up is identifying leverage. Leverage is probably the most important part of your negotiations. And if you don't know where to find it, that's where all of a sudden you're going to be accepting increases of like 2, 3, 5%. And then you accept those and you're locked in for 2 years. When we do negotiations, we are very, very savvy on where to find leverage that will get these insurance to compete with each other. So the most important and most effective leverage for negotiating is leasing leverage. And Bailey already kind of touched on this with, you can be in network through the direct contract, you can be in network through a bunch of different companies. The main thing the insurance companies have tried to do with this whole tactic is to get as many in-network providers as they can and choose between different fee schedules to process their claims. So if you're not directly contracted with Aetna, for example, and you have 5 different contracts who do lease Aetna, technically they can take a look at your claims and process that in-network through the lowest fee schedule that they see. So this is a huge problem that offices are dealing with, is claims downgrading. You probably see in your office all the time where maybe you're getting a principal or a Humana patient coming in, and even if you have a direct contract with them, they might have paid it on United Concordia fees, which are, I don't know, maybe 30, 40% lower. So those are the types of things that we're combating with our services. But what I'm getting at there is that leasing can actually be used to your advantage if you know what you're doing. So identifying the leverage, basically, you can take a look at the high options, compare them to the low options and say, Aetna, thank you for your proposal you offered, but we know that we can be in network with your same members through Connection Dental or something else, and they're paying 40% higher than you. So when you give them this type of data and let them know that you know your options and that you're comparing and can switch up at any time, that's when all of a sudden you start getting increases of 15%, 20%, sometimes higher than that. It all depends on what data you've collected and trying to use these insurance companies to compete with each other. Other types of leverage can include like practice size. If you have associates or other doctors, new doctors who aren't contracted with the insurance companies, that can be used as leverage. Updated UCR fees is important for that. You basically want to use anything you can to try to get increases, because ultimately the insurance companies can say no if they want to. Important step here next is follow through. So follow up frequently. Obviously, the insurance companies and these reps, they will ignore emails. They do it to us all the time. They probably think we're so annoying because they're getting an email from us every week being like, are you working on this? You have to say you're working on it. So just making sure you're staying on top of it and tracking that. Don't stop at no is a big one. A lot of offices are like, we asked for an increase and they said no. Well, you got to keep on bugging them. Don't accept the first proposal. A lot of the time, insurance companies are happy to offer a first increase to an office who's reaching out for negotiations. And sometimes, like I said, that improvement is 2 to 3%. The office is sometimes thrilled that they're getting any improvement, so they just accept those. But you can negotiate 3, 4 proposals is usually what we end up doing. Basically until the insurance company says, okay, you've gotten enough, we're not going to do any more. And then also part of the follow through, making sure that you're looking at your detailed code comparisons to steer the negotiation in your favor. Meaning that, if you receive your first proposal and you need to go higher, obviously sending over those codes of concern, those priority codes of yours with your UCR fee being like, thank you for the proposal you sent. We need to focus in on these. Like I said, those are going to be about 90% of your revenue. So if you do that, you're going to get a lot more out of your negotiation. Insurance companies love to put allotted funds on codes that you're never going to use. And they know that because they track what your utilization is. And then lastly here, is to accept and implement. This is also important. Once you get a new fee schedule and you've agreed to the fees, everything looks good, make sure that you accept it on time because they will expire. Make sure that the rep confirms receipt of the paperwork or the confirmation or whatever. You want to make sure that they say, hey, I got this is processing. Some offices or even, reps have tried to do that with us where it's been submitted and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we didn't get that. Well, and then make sure that you're tracking your claims to ensure that the new fee is being used on your claims once it's been effective. So that is a huge portion of this is negotiations. When we go through and do negotiations for offices, we put all these steps together. Like I said, the negotiations takes the longest amount of time, but it really does fill in what you need to get to your end product. Bailey's going to go over optimize. And this step is where everything's been negotiated to its very highest. We've even gotten offers from companies you might not be in network with. You have a whole network scope of the market. And from there, the goal is to get each insurance company paying through their highest paying option, whether it's through keeping the direct contract or maybe it's through leasing. So Bailey, go ahead and take over for Optimize.
Thank you. Okay, so this is one of our more advanced steps usually that this is the step that offices are looking to take if you're wanting to get even higher increases than those direct increases that you received. And this step is taken, like Kelsey said, when you've negotiated each direct contract to its highest degree, and you're getting paid as much as you possibly can through those direct contracts, and those increases are already accepted. And this is the step where a lot of offices, we don't recommend that you do this on your own, because this is where leasing can work to your advantage if you know what you're doing. And so, like Kelsey said, those leasing arrangements that you know, potentially used in your negotiation leverage and stuff like that, if you have a leaser that is paying quite high and they can lease other insurance companies, that is where you use that leasing to your advantage and kind of make contract changes to get those other participation contracts potentially restructured to the highest option they can possibly get. And this is where a lot of offices, let's say you get, you know, 10 to 15% increase with a direct company, and if you're wanting to move that to an even higher leaser, that's where you get an additional sometimes 30 to 40% increase with that. So this is where the big increases come into play. I just had an office, for example, that we restructured a bunch of their contracts to a higher leaser for about 70% increases across a lot of their companies. So this is a step that really brings in a lot of revenue if you're wanting to really boost up those fees to the next level. But we don't recommend, like I said, we don't recommend doing this on your own because it is a very complicated process, and reconfiguring those contracts to use the highest leaser, it is very difficult, and the insurance companies, a lot of the time, they don't want you to do it, obviously. They don't like paying you those higher fees. So they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that you don't know what you're doing, and that to, you know, even bluff and say, oh, you can't do that, and they won't pay on that fee schedule. So and when you're optimizing steps, it can mean terminating a direct contract and then restructuring that to a higher leaser, or merely submitting an opt-out or adding contracts and stuff like that. Opting out is a little bit different than terminations, but opting out is a little bit of a more simple way that offices can easily optimize their contracts and make sure that those lower hanging leasing arrangements cannot be used. For example, one of the most important companies that we usually recommend that offices opt out of anyway, even if you're not going to, you know, go on with a huge optimization project, is United Concordia. A lot of offices all of a sudden see United Concordia coming in on their claims as a leasing arrangement, and a lot of the time it is a really low fee, and insurance companies love to pick up on United Concordia. But what a lot of offices don't know is that you can actually opt out of that leasing, and so you can keep your direct contract and then opt out of that leasing just to make sure that once those claims are coming in, they can stop using that lower fee. And that's a really easy optimization tactic that you can use just to make sure that any of those low leasing arrangements that you absolutely don't want them using, that they are out of the picture and you don't have to worry about that. And another thing is when offices have a PPO structure, no office is the same with their PPO structure. Everyone is different, and negotiation projects and optimization in general is going to be different based on each practice. Whether you're in leasing or a direct contracts, they're all going to be different. And so it's definitely not cookie cutter. Everyone is, you know, everyone has their unique structure with how they participate. Kelsey, you want to take it away with the last step?
Yep. Thanks so much, Bay. The last one is illuminate. So this one is pretty much like, okay, look at, you've done all of this work. What does it actually mean? Once all your fee schedules are negotiated to their very highest level, you've optimized by making sure that no lower fee schedules are taking place. All the higher leasing arrangements are taking place. Once you have each carrier being paid at its very best fee, that's where you can kind of take a look at your practice goals, and the path forward is illuminated. So what this entails is basically from now taking a look at what you've accomplished through your negotiations and see what that means for your practice. So taking a look at what those increases actually equated to dollar amount is a big part of that. It kind of shows you, okay, if we do a similar amount of business as we did last year with these insurance companies, now with a 10% increase, it shows you what to expect as far as new revenue for this next year, this new round of the new fees. And then from there, you can allot that money into growing your practice, or see what it actually did for you. By now, after everything is said and done, you'll be able to know with confidence what fee schedule is going to be used for each company. And that actually speaks volumes, because I know that a lot of you office managers sometimes will quote a patient or take a look at a fee, and all of a sudden a claim or EOB comes in and it's paid on a totally different fee. So that the goal is to eliminate that confusion, knowing exactly what fee schedule is going to be used for each patient as they come in, no questions, no downgrading. Identifying how much what percentage of your UCR each of your plans is paying. So that kind of gives you a scope of like, here's your high plans, your low plans, and then lets you kind of take a look at a full scope of which patients do we make the most money on? Which patients do we make the least amount of money on? This will help you kind of decide what you want to do as far as maybe keeping all your insurances where they're at. Or maybe there's a plan that pays 40% of your UCR. They didn't negotiate well. They're not going to improve anymore. Taking a look at how many members you have with that plan and see if it makes sense to just, phase it out of network. Maybe focus more on on growing the patient base on those more profitable paying plans so that you're losing less money. Obviously, we go back to the analyze step where we kind of want to decide what situation is your office in. Are you in overbooked mode? Are you in the sweet spot, like you want to maintain where you're at? Or are you in a position where you need and want growth for your office? From figuring that out, you can decide, okay, with our PPO participation, maybe we want to add a couple plans so we can get more patients in the door. If you want to maintain things exactly where they're at and you've hit that sweet spot, you can just keep things where they are. And now all of a sudden you're getting, 30, 40% higher fees for the work that you're doing. So you can continue on with that and then negotiate again in another 2 years. So you can constantly continue to improve what your office is able to get. And then if you're in that overbooked situation, you can kind of take a look at, like I said, the scope of your contracts and decide if it makes sense to maybe remove or opt out of a few networks, so that you can prioritize your time with higher paying patients. And once you're all the way through this, increased revenue through PPO negotiations and optimization can increase your revenue by $50,000 or more annually if done properly. Most of our clients see 10 times return on investment when they do this. So when we do a project, we like to track an ROI as we go. So we take a look at what your insurance carriers, how much revenue you did the previous year, and then we calculate how much additional revenue that's going to mean for your new year with the increases we've implemented. That will give you a good idea of how much you made by what that project was. So when we go through and do negotiations for offices, we go through all of these steps. Like I said, it takes about 4 to 5 months to get through everything, but then at the end, you'll be in a much better spot as far as being able to make more off of the work you're already doing, rather than just, seeing patients and writing off about 50-60% of their fee, which is not ideal. So if we move on here, I actually have a QR code here. Go ahead and scan this. If you go and put in your information, just your email and such, we will be sending over a packet of all this information, basically a breakdown packet of PPO negotiations, these 5 steps we went over, and a couple articles, and we'll also send some case studies over there too. So if you guys want to take a second and just scan that, if you don't have your cell phone handy, what you can do is go to www.beaconpposolutions.com/webinar, right, Bailey? Yeah.
Yes.
It takes you to the same place. But if you have your phone handy and it's an easy, quick thing, go ahead and scan that, and we'll get you the packet of information, everything we went over today, and a couple other little things that can just be a little bit of an educational thing for you. I think that's pretty much it on our end. I think that we have time to go over questions. Margaret, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if the group has any questions, we'd love to field those.
And feel free to mention anything specific to your office too. If you have anything that's a little bit more of a technical question, we're open
Might
books
as well
and we
ask
love
us while we're
sharing.
here.
Yeah, we love sharing information. So another thing as well is I recommend that you schedule a consultation with us. We do free consultations. It's very educational. I go over all of the information for your office and let you know what a negotiation project would look like, what success you would have. We also offer a PPO revenue analysis for offices for free. The main reason we do this is we want to make sure that any clients that we take on are going to make a very good return on investment on this work. So main priority for us is getting good results. The best way to do that is for me to also take a look at how much revenue you do with each insurance company and show you how much you wrote off and kind of what to expect as far as a return on investment through negotiations. So if you want to book a consultation with us, you can just go to our website. It's www.beaconpposolutions.com, or you can Google us, you'll find us. And there's just buttons to book a consultation. And it's no charge to you. If anything, you'll just get some really good information, some chit chat. It'll be fun. And you can either use that information for you to take care of it, or you can have us go and do it for you. But either way, we have a money back guarantee when we go through and do these projects.
That's great. Does anybody who is on today have questions? No question too small.
And I can even bring up some hypotheticals if no one has specific questions.
Yeah, maybe one or two examples recently, Kels, from maybe even some clients without names that we've had tremendous success with would be great.
Yep, let's go ahead and do it. So first off, a good question that we usually get for offices is in regard to leasing. A lot of people ask, like, is it worth it for me to even be in network with these leasing companies? They're putting me in with a bunch of different companies. They're paying on their fee schedule. Do I just opt out of everything? Question is, or answer is no. I mean, a lot of the time the insurance leasing can work into your advantage, like I said before. So sometimes it's more beneficial for you to be in network through someone like Connection Dental instead of having a direct contract with someone like Guardian. If you go and compare companies like that, oftentimes Guardian is paying probably about 50 to 55% of UCR versus like something like Connection Dental or Dentamax or something else willing to pay 70 to 80%. So you can actually use the leasing in your benefit. So it's not a good idea to just be like, you know what, I'm going to drop out of all of those. I don't want any of those. Because if you go through and do a project like this, you'll know exactly where those leasing arrangements will benefit you.
Kelsey, we also have a few in the chat box. From Christina Spencer, how would you start a review to negotiate fee schedules with Delta Dental? Not good news there.
That's always the other question, is what to do about Delta Dental. And the answer is there's not much you can do with Delta Dental. They're the only company that really doesn't negotiate, especially their PPO fees. So if you're an office that's in network with PPO and Premier, you always have the option to try to get them to change you to Premier only, in which you would use that higher tiered fee schedule. But it's very uncommon that they let this happen. For your PPO fees, unfortunately, it's based on them doing reviews on their own time and making adjustments on their own time.
And unfortunately, we hear this from almost every single office that even comes to us for PPO negotiations. They say, "What do we do about Delta Dental?" And it's really, really quite frustrating that they, like Kelsey said, they're one of the only companies that absolutely full stop will not negotiate. So that's a pretty frustrating one.
Oh, and we had an office that dropped Delta in December. Very happy with that choice. That's awesome. I mean, when you take a look at member numbers or how many patient numbers you have with an insurance versus, you know, what they're paying you, if you're writing off 60%, it's like, yeah, you're keeping busy and you're filling the chair. But if you're not making money on it, it's sometimes a hard thing. Good job I mean, it sounds like you retained a lot of those patients, which is awesome.
Got another question too, guys.
Yeah.
Just so it's in the Q&A. Just wanted to make sure you guys saw it as
perfect.
well.
Let me see this other one too. Wondering how this happens. Dropped Aetna, sent letters to patients now we're out of network and they're processing on someone else's fee schedule. Oh, okay. Yes. So this is a good example.
We'll go to that next one in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'll grab the other one. So Kathy actually asked, wondered how this happens, dropped Aetna, sent letters to patients, and now we're out of network and they're processing on someone else's fee schedule. And it's actually worse than the original Aetna fee schedule. So this is where offices get very confused. When you start to mess with little things, you don't know, unless you're aware of the leasing arrangements, if that's just going to be picked up. That's a big win for Aetna, because in this situation, they're like, well, they terminated, but who cares, because they're in network with this other company and now they can just process claims in network through there. In this situation though, Kathy, if there was, if there's a higher paying option in the office for Aetna to go to, you can actually get it through there, which would be higher than the one that they're using now, higher than the Aetna fee schedule they were using before. So the way to do that would just be to figure out on the EOB what fee schedule is being used. And then from there, you can opt out of those selective leasing arrangements. Again, kind of like Bailey said, you don't have to terminate a contract to stop leasing from happening. You can just submit a letter to the insurance company saying, hey, we want to keep you, but we want you to stop leasing these 2, 3, 4 networks. Basically turning off that option. It's like you're kind of like running a stream of water and you're blocking off anywhere you want the water to not go. And then it only leaves one avenue and it can just pour through there. So let's go to the one in the Q&A. What is a tactic to get an insurance company to increase fees if they always refuse? For example, we contracted with Cigna in 2016. They have refused to increase any fees the 3 to 4 times I've submitted my request as they instruct over the past 9 years. Okay. Not cool of them. But leasing leverage is everything. So even if you're in network with only Cigna, if you only I don't know if you're still there, but is that the only contract you have? Do you have a lot of PPO participation, or is it more just, or are you mostly using Cigna?
Linnea, you can unmute too if you want. You should be able to unmute yourself and just chat.
Okay.
Cigna, Carrington, and Principal. Okay.
So insurance companies can continue to deny a fee increase. We see this sometimes. Ultimately, letting them know that you know what your options are is the way to get them to increase. Sometimes that means threatening termination. For example, you're in network with Carrington. Carrington actually leases Cigna. So see, that's such a other companies would keep that secret, but that information is important, where you can actually be in network with Cigna through Carrington. So if your Carrington fee schedule is fair and pays well, using that as your leverage. And then if they don't increase it still, if the fees are bad enough, it might make sense to just move that participation over to someone like Carrington. Okay, she says, haha, yep. Saw that on the Carrington's list, but Carrington also said no since 2019 that they don't do individual provider negotiations. So here's where my technical brain comes in, where I'm already kind of scoping out what your office dynamic looks like and what probably would be a good option for you. Is to go through and negotiate with all carriers. You're probably in network with a handful of companies through Carrington and through Principal. Principal's probably putting you in network with Aetna, Emeritus, a bunch of others. Carrington puts you in with a bunch as well. Cigna might be putting you in with a couple as well. So you actually have full PPO participation at your office. My recommendation would be to go through and negotiate, and especially with companies that you're not contracted with. If you start getting stuck on your contracts not improving like Carrington and Cigna, start looking for other TPAs that lease those same networks and are willing to try to compete to get a new provider on. That would be probably the best strategy, because then maybe you'll find something that surpasses Carrington, can take on Cigna, can take on Principal, all those companies under it. Sometimes you have to think and look outside of your box to figure out how you're going to get the increases, especially if the insurance companies just keep on putting roadblocks there for you. You are welcome.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, great question. Anybody else have anything?
Okay, you guys. Well, I just want to put a little commercial in here because I know that our Porter crew on the line does not do a fantastic job sometimes of singing their own praises. So I do want to share that out of all the companies that Burkhart's practice support team has an opportunity to work with over the years that are actively doing negotiations, I have to say that Beacon is the firm that both Kathy and I just continue to hear only positive results, only positive feedback from the practices that we've served over the years. So great opportunity for many of you to pursue that opportunity through the QR code if you haven't already scanned it, to set up an opportunity with that no charge consultation just to see what they're able to do for your practice. Want to thank all of you, if there's no further questions, for sharing a little bit of your Friday morning with Burkhart and Beacon. Some of you might be coming off a spring break, so this was a gentle re-entry into work. I know Kelsey and Bailey are really looking forward to providing you that no charge consultation, just to take a check and see if your practice would benefit from their services. If you need any additional support, we're at your service as well here at Practice Support Team. Want to encourage you to reach out to us as well, knowing that from both Beacon's perspective and Burkhart Practice Support Team's perspective, your success is our success. So thanks for our awesome guests today, sharing some incredible info with us and some really helpful tidbits. Of course, always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and have a lovely weekend.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you so much.
If the sun's shining your way, go out and enjoy it.
Yep.